Codex Vaticanus Graecus 2061, usually known as Uncial 048 Alpha 1, is a Greek uncial manuscript on parchment. It contains some parts of the New Testament, homilies of several authors, and Strabo's Geographica. Formerly it was known also as the Codex Basilianus 100, earlier as Codex Patriniensis 27. It was designated by P. The manuscript has survived in a fragmentary condition. It is a double palimpsest. It contains parts of the 7 different literary works. They are written in several types of uncial script. The oldest text is from the 5th century, the youngest from the 10th century. Palimpsest. The manuscript in some parts is a double palimpsest, with the biblical text having been overwritten twice, resulting in it being very difficult to read. The upper and youngest text contains homilies of Gregory of Nazianzus from the 10th century, on 316 parchment leaves. The size of the single leaves is 23.5 by 22 centimeters. The leaves 254 to 292 contain a gospel lectionary of the 7th-8th century, written in uncial letters in a single column, 14 lines per page. Bernard de Montfaucon and Angelo Mai saw the manuscript, but Pierre Battifolle examined it in more detail. Gregory classified it as lectionary 559b on his list of the New Testament manuscripts. At present it is classified under the number 2321 on the Gregory Orland list. The leaves 164, 169, 174, 175, 209, 214, 217 contain text of a gospel lectionary from the 8th-9th century, written in square uncial letters, in 2 columns, 21 lines, size 28.5 by 22 centimeters. It was classified as lectionary 559a on the list of the New Testament lectionaries. Actually it is classified as 559 on the list Gregory Orland. Gregory dated it to the 8th century. The leaves 138 to 163, 165 to 168, 170, 173, 176 to 178, 203 to 208, 210 to 213, 215 to 220, 223 to 226, 228, 231 to 233 contain text of homilies from the 9th century, size 25.5 by 17 centimeters, in leaned uncial letters, 2 columns per page, and 27 lines per page. The leaves 234, 236, 238, 239, 241, 243, 245 contain text of homilies from the 6th century, written in square uncial letters, size 19.3 by 18.5 centimeters, in 2 columns, 22 lines per page. The leaves 235, 237, 240, 243, 244, 246 to 249, 251 to 253, 310 to 315 contain text of Geographica of Strabo the 6th century, written in leaned uncial letters, size 20.5 by 20.3, in 3 columns, 38 lines per page. The text was published by Giuseppe Casaluci in 1884. The leaves 198, 199, 221, 222, 229, 230, 293 to 303, 305 to 308 contain text of the Acts, Catholic epistles, and Pauline epistles. They are designated as Codex 048 on the list Gregory Orland, Alpha 1070. Scrivener designated it by Hebrew letter. It is a Greek uncial manuscript of the New Testament on parchment, dated paleographically to the 5th century. Description of 048. The Codex contains the text of the Acts of Apostles, general epistles, and Pauline epistles, in a fragmentary condition. Only 21 parchment leaves, from original 316, have survived. They constitute folios 198 to 199, 221 to 222, 229 to 230, 293 to 303, 305 to 308 of Vaticanus Graecus 2061. Size of the original pages was 30 cm by 27 cm. The surviving leaves contain texts: Acts chapter 26 verse 6-27 to 4, 28 to 3-31, James 4:14 to 5:20, 1 Peter chapter 1 verses 1 to 12, 2 Peter chapter 2 verses 4 to 8, 2:13 to 3:15, 1 John chapter 4 verse 6-5 to 13, 5:17-18, 5:21, 2 John, 3 John, Romans chapter 13 verse 4-15 to 9, 1 Corinthians chapter 2 verse 1-3 to 11, 3:22, 4 to 4-6, 5 to 5-11, 6 to 3-11, 12:23 to 15:17, 15:20-27, 2 Corinthians chapter 4 verse 7-6 to 8, 8 to 9-18, 8:21-10 to 6, Ephesians chapter 5 verse 8 and Philippians chapter 1 verses 8 to 23, 2, 1 to 4, 2 to 6-8, col. 1 to 2-2 to 8, 2 11-14, 22-23, 3 to 7-8, 3:12 to 4:18, 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 verses 1, 5 to 6, 1 Timothy chapter 5 verse 6-6 to 17, 6:20-21, 2 Timothy chapter 1 verses 4 to 6, 1 to 8, 2 to 2-25, Titus chapter 3 verse 13 and Philemon, Hebrews chapter 11 verse 32-13 to 4. The other sources give slightly different contents, because in some parts the manuscript is illegible. Actual order of books: Acts of the Apostles, Catholic epistles, and Pauline epistles, but this is not sure. The original order could be different. The titles of biblical books are short, e.g., Pyro Omicron Sigma Theta Epsilon Sigma Sigma Alpha Lambda Omicron Nu Iota Kappa Epsilon Iota of Sigma Alpha Iota Omega Alpha Nu Nu Omicron Upsilon Beta. The text is written in 3 columns per page, 40-41 lines per page, 12 to 15 letters per line. The letters are square and round. The initial letters are not much bigger, and they are not written at the margin before the column. It has not breathings and accents. Also, there is no diaeresis over the letters iota and upsilon, usually used in other manuscripts frequently. It lacks the euthalian apparatus, and this is evidence for the early dating of the manuscript. Only in some places are given marks for liturgical readings. The manuscript is one of the very few New Testament manuscripts to be written with 3 columns per page. The other 2 Greek codices written in that way are Codex Vaticanus and Uncial 053. The trilingual minuscule Codex 460 is, naturally, also in 3 columns. The nomina sacra written in an abbreviated way. The words written at the end of line are also abbreviated. At the margin to Romans chapter 15 verse 1 is written kappa zeta mu epsilon tau alpha tau pi. It means the 7th Sunday after the Pentecost. In the Byzantine Synaxarion, the lesson of Romans chapter 15 verses 1 to 7 is read in this Sunday. Text of 048. The Greek text of this codex is not clearly identified, but the Alexandrian element is stronger than the Byzantine, with some of the Western readings. Hermann von Soden did not classify it at all. According to Frederick G. Kenyon, its text is close to the Codex Alexandrinus et al. And placed it in Category 2, but this assessment was based on only 44 readings in Pauline epistles. In 1 Timothy, Philemon it has the Western text type. In Acts chapter 26 verse 6 it reads epsilon iota sigma for pi rho omicron sigma. In Acts chapter 26 verse 14 it reads lambda epsilon gamma omicron upsilon sigma alpha nu pi rho omicron sigma mu epsilon for lambda omicron upsilon sigma alpha nu pi rho omicron sigma mu epsilon. In Acts chapter 26 verse 15 it reads iota eta sigma omicron upsilon sigma omicron nu alpha zeta omega rho alpha iota omicron sigma for iota eta sigma omicron upsilon sigma. The reading of the codex is supported by minuscule 6, 104, 614, 1175 Codex Gigas. Some manuscripts of Vulgate SYRP H. In Acts chapter 26 verse 28 it reads pi omicron iota eta sigma alpha iota for gamma epsilon nu epsilon sigma theta alpha iota. The reading is supported by Papyrus 74, Sinaiticus, Alexandrianus, Vaticanus, 33, 81, 1175 and several other manuscripts. In Acts chapter 28 verse 14 it reads pi alpha rho for epsilon pi. In Acts chapter 28 verse 16 it reads epsilon pi epsilon tau rho alpha pi eta tau omega pi alpha epsilon lambda omega. Majority of manuscripts reads for omicron epsilon kappa alpha tau omicron nu tau alpha rho chi omicron sigma pi alpha rho epsilon delta omega kappa epsilon nu tau omicron epsilon sigma delta epsilon sigma mu iota omicron epsilon sigma tau omega sigma tau rho alpha tau omicron pi epsilon delta alpha rho I omega tau omicron delta epsilon pi alpha epsilon lambda omega epsilon pi epsilon tau rho alpha pi eta. In Acts chapter 28 verse 23 it reads eta lambda theta omicron nu for eta kappa omicron nu. In Acts chapter 28 verse 29 it does not have reading of majority kappa alpha iota tau alpha epsilon alpha epsilon tau omicron epsilon iota pi omicron nu tau omicron sigma alpha pi eta lambda theta omicron nu omicron iota omicron epsilon delta alpha iota omicron iota pi omicron lambda eta nu epsilon chi omicron nu tau eta sigma epsilon nu epsilon alpha epsilon tau omicron iota sigma epsilon zeta eta tau eta sigma iota news. The omission is supported by manuscripts Papyrus 74, Codex Sinaiticus, Alexandrianus, Vaticanus, Codex Laudianus, Codex Aethus Lavrensis, 33, 81, 1175, 1739, 2464. In Romans chapter 13 verse 9 it has additional phrase omicron epsilon psi epsilon upsilon delta omicron mu alpha rho tau upsilon rho eta sigma epsilon iota sigma. The reading is supported by the manuscripts 811043651506 ABVGCL Hotbo. In Romans chapter 14 verse 3 it reads Omicron delta epsilon along with Alexandrian manuscripts. The majority reads Kappa Alpha Iota Omicron. In Romans chapter 14 verse 4 it reads Theta Epsilon Omicron Sigma along with Byzantine manuscripts. The Alexandrian manuscripts read Kappa Epsilon Rho Iota Omicron Sigma. In Romans chapter 14 verse 10 it reads Chi Rho Iota Sigma Tau Omicron Epsilon along with Psi Uncial 0209. And the Byzantine manuscripts, the Alexandrian and Western manuscripts read Theta Epsilon Omicron Epsilon. In Romans chapter 14 verse 21 it lacks reading of the Byzantine text Eta Sigma Kappa Alpha Nu Delta Alpha Lambda Iota Zeta Epsilon Tau Alpha Iota Eta Alpha Sigma Theta Epsilon Nu Epsilon Iota. In Romans chapter 15 verse 2 it reads Upsilon Mu Omega Nu for Eta Mu Omega Nu. In Romans chapter 15 verse 4 it supports the Byzantine reading Pi Rho Omicron Epsilon Gamma Rho Alpha Phi Eta. The Alexandrian and Western manuscripts read Epsilon Gamma Rho Alpha Phi Eta. In Romans chapter 15 verse 5 it reads Iota Eta Sigma Omicron Epsilon Nu Chi Rho Iota Sigma Tau Omicron Nu B D G Psi. And the majority of manuscripts read Chi Rho Iota Sigma Tau Omicron Nu Iota Eta Sigma Omicron Epsilon Nu. In Romans chapter 15 verse 7 it reads Kappa Alpha Iota Omicron Chi Rho Iota Sigma Tau Omicron Sigma Pi Rho Omicron Sigma Epsilon Lambda Alpha Beta Epsilon Tau Omicron Eta Mu Alpha Sigma Epsilon Iota Sigma Delta Omicron Chi Alpha Nu Tau Omicron Epsilon Theta Epsilon Omicron Epsilon for Kappa Alpha Iota Omicron Chi Rho Iota Sigma Tau Omicron Sigma Pi Rho Omicron Sigma Epsilon Lambda Alpha Beta Epsilon Tau Omicron Epsilon Mu Alpha Sigma Epsilon Iota Sigma Delta Omicron Chi Alpha Nu Tau Omicron Epsilon Theta Epsilon Omicron Epsilon. The reading is supported by Codex Vaticanus, Codex Claromontanus, Codex Porphyrianus, 104, 614, 629, 1506, Copsa. In Romans chapter 15 verse 8 it reads Gamma Epsilon Nu Eta Sigma Theta Alpha Iota along with Sinaiticus, Alexandrianus, and the Byzantine manuscripts BCDFG Psi 630-1739-1881 read Gamma Epsilon Nu Epsilon Sigma Theta Alpha Iota. In 1 Corinthians chapter 3 verse 4 it reads Omicron Epsilon Kappa Alpha Nu Theta Rho Omega Pi Omicron Iota along with Papyrus 46, Sinaiticus, Alexandrianus, Vaticanus, Ephremi, 33, 81, 1175, 1506, 1739, 1881, Sinaiticus squared, Psi, and the Byzantine manuscripts read Omicron Epsilon Chi Iota Sigma Alpha Rho Kappa Iota Kappa Omicron Iota. DFG 629 read Omicron Epsilon Chi Iota Alpha Nu Theta Rho Omega Pi Omicron Iota. In 1 Corinthians chapter 15 verse 7 it reads Epsilon Pi Epsilon Iota Tau Alpha for Epsilon Iota Tau Alpha. The reading is supported by P46, Sinaiticus, Alexandrianus, FG, K, 0243, AD 33, 81, 614, 630, 1175, 1739, 1881. In 2 Corinthians chapter 12 verse 4 it reads lambda epsilon gamma omega for lambda epsilon gamma omega mu epsilon nu, along with the manuscript Papyrus 46, Ephremi Claromontanus, Eph. History. Scrivener and Gregory dated the manuscript to the 5th century. Formerly it was held in the monastery of St. Mary of Paterium, a suburb of Rossano in Calabria, whence it was taken about the end of the 17th century to the Vatican. Here it was rediscovered by Pierre Battifol in 1887. The manuscript was examined by Bernard de Montfaucon. Vitaliano Donati examined it for Giuseppe Bianchini. Cardinal Angelo Mai noticed this manuscript and used it in prolegomena of his edition of Codex Vaticanus Graecus 1209. According to Gregory, it is an important palimpsest of the New Testament. The Codex was cited in Novum Testamentum Grace of Nestle Orland. The Codex now is located in the Vatican Library.